They say power reveals character, but sometimes it reveals secrets that were never meant to see daylight. Alpha Commander Rengi Tamati thought he was exposing a spy when he ordered the Omega stripped before the assembled court. He thought he was protecting his pack, defending his territory, asserting his dominance over a wolf who refused to submit. What he didn't expect was the golden phoenix rising across her shoulders, the royal crest that had been lost to legend for 3 generations. In that moment, as gasps echoed through the stone hall and the Omega's silver eyes met his with centuries of bloodline authority, Rengi realized he hadn't just made a mistake. He'd committed an act of treason against the true heir to the Northern Throne. Before we dive into this tale of hidden crowns and forbidden bonds, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because stories like this, where everything you think you know gets turned upside down in a single moment, these are the stories that stay with you long after the final word. And tell me the city you're watching from so that I can send you a hug, because you're about to need it after the emotional journey we're about to take together. Now let's begin. The Great Hall of the Kahurangi Pack had witnessed many trials over its 400-year history, but none quite like this. Rengi Tamati stood at the head of the court, his massive frame radiating the kind of authority that came from 20 years of military command and a bloodline that traced back to the pack's founders. At 38, he was in his prime, battle-scarred, ruthless when necessary, and absolutely uncompromising when it came to pack security. His dark eyes swept across the assembled wolves, reading the tension in every posture, every barely contained whisper. They were afraid. But they should be. Because standing in the center of the hall, wrists bound in silver-laced rope that suppressed her wolf, was the reason for that fear. Her name was Anahara, though Rengi suspected that was as false as everything else about her. She'd appeared at their borders 3 months ago, claiming to be a lone Omega seeking sanctuary. The pack had taken her in. They always did with Omegas, rare and precious as they were in a world where they made up less than 5% of the werewolf population. Omegas were nurturers, healers, the emotional anchors that kept packs stable. But this Omega had been asking too many questions, accessing restricted areas. And yesterday, Rengi's intelligence network had intercepted a message she tried to send to an unknown recipient, coded in an ancient dialect that only the oldest families still used. She was a spy. He was certain of it. What he wasn't certain of was who had sent her, and that uncertainty gnawed at him like silver poisoning. Anahara, Rengi's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. You stand accused of espionage against the Kahurangi Pack, of infiltrating our territory under false pretenses, of gathering intelligence about our defenses, our resources, our vulnerabilities. The Omega raised her head, and Rengi felt the impact of her gaze like a physical blow. Her eyes were an unusual silver, not the common amber or brown of most wolves, but a shade that seemed to catch and hold the light from the torches lining the walls. Her hair was long and dark, falling in waves past her shoulders despite the rough treatment she'd received from his guards. Even bound and accused, she held herself with a dignity that irritated him. Omegas were supposed to be soft, submissive. This one looked at him like she was measuring him for a grave. I stand accused of nothing, Anahara said, her voice calm and clear. Because I've done nothing wrong. I came here seeking peace, seeking a place to belong. If asking questions about pack history is a crime, then half your members are guilty. Don't play games with me. Rengi descended from the raised platform, moving toward her with predatory grace. The crowd parted before him. The message we intercepted wasn't about pack history. It was written in Old Tongue, a language that hasn't been commonly spoken in over a century. Who taught you that? Who are you really working for? I told you. You told me lies. His voice rose, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. And I'm done with lies. I'm done with pretty words and innocent eyes. This pack has enemies, Omega. Enemies who would love nothing more than to find our weaknesses and exploit them. And you've had access to everything. The Alpha's schedule, our patrol routes, the locations of our food stores and armories. Anahara's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Rengi circled her slowly, his commander instincts cataloging every detail. She was smaller than most wolves, maybe 5'6", delicately built in the way of omegas. But there was something else, something he couldn't quite name. An aura of something. Power. No, that didn't make sense. Omegas didn't have that kind of presence. Last chance, he said, stopping in front of her. Tell me who sent you, and I'll make sure your punishment is merciful. Refuse, and I'll have no choice but to assume the worst. We have protocols for enemy agents. The Omega met his eyes steadily. I have nothing to confess, Commander. Because I've committed no crime. Frustration boiled in Rengi's chest. He'd interrogated hundreds of suspects over his career, captured enemy soldiers, rogue wolves, traitors to the pack. He knew when someone was lying, knew the tells, the micro-expressions that gave away guilt. But this Omega. She was either telling the truth or she was the best liar he'd ever encountered. And he couldn't afford to guess wrong. Not with his pack's safety at stake. Fine, he said coldly. Then you'll submit to a full examination. Confusion flickered across Anahara's face. What? Spies often carry identifying marks, Rengi continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. Tattoos indicating pack affiliation. Scars from training rituals. I've seen enemy agents with messages tattooed in places they think we won't look. He gestured to his guards. Strip her. We'll search every inch of skin for evidence. The hall erupted. Wolves surged to their feet, voices rising in protest. Even in a culture where nudity during shifts was commonplace, this was different. This was ritual humiliation, a violation of an Omega's dignity in the most public way possible. Commander, this isn't necessary. That was Hannah, the pack's head healer and one of the few wolves who'd dare question him. She's an Omega. You can't. I can and I will. Rengi's alpha command rolled through the room, forcing submission, silencing dissent. Only the strongest wolves could resist that tone, and even they struggled against it. This Omega has betrayed our hospitality, our trust. If she's innocent, she has nothing to hide. If she's guilty, we'll find the proof on her skin. He turned back to Anahara, expecting to see fear, shame, anger. Anything but the eerie calm on her face. You don't want to do this, she said quietly. Is that a threat? It's a warning. Her silver eyes held his, and for just a moment, Rengi felt something shift in the air between them, like the pressure change before a storm. Some secrets, Commander, are dangerous to uncover. Rengi laughed, but it was a harsh sound. The only thing I'm about to uncover is evidence that will justify your execution. Guards. Two of his most trusted wolves moved forward, Pania and Wiremu, both seasoned warriors who'd served under him for years. They knew their duty, even if they didn't like it. Pania's hands were surprisingly gentle as she began to unfasten the simple dress Anahara wore. I'm sorry, she whispered, too low for most to hear. Orders. I know, Anahara replied. It's not your fault. The dress fell away, pooling at her feet. Then the thin undergarments. Within moments, the Omega stood naked before the assembled court, and Rengi forced himself to remain clinical, detached. This wasn't about a woman's body. This was about finding evidence. He gestured for her to turn. Anahara did so slowly, and Rengi scanned her skin with a practiced eye. Pale flesh, unmarred by the usual scars of wolf life. No tattoos on her arms, her sides, her legs. Nothing on her collarbone or. She turned her back to him, and the world stopped. Rengi heard the gasp that went through the crowd, heard the clatter of someone dropping a weapon, heard Hannah's strangled "gods above and below." But he couldn't process any of it, because he was staring at Anahara's back, at the mark that covered her shoulder blades and spine, rendered in gold that seemed to shimmer in the torchlight as if it were alive. Phoenix. Not tattooed. Not painted. This was something else entirely, a birthmark maybe, or some kind of mark that went deeper than skin. The bird's wings spread wide across her shoulders, its tail feathers cascading down her spine, its head thrown back in eternal triumph. And woven through the phoenix's form were symbols in old tongue, words that Rengi recognized even if he couldn't read them all. Because every wolf in the Northern Territories knew this mark. It was the royal crest, the symbol of the bloodline that had ruled the northern packs for 8 centuries, until they'd vanished 3 generations ago in a coup that had shattered the old order and plunged the territories into decades of warfare. The symbol that marked the true alpha of alphas, the one wolf whose authority superseded all others, whose word was law, whose bloodline carried gifts that hadn't been seen in the common population for centuries. The symbol that shouldn't exist anymore, because the royal line had been wiped out. Except it hadn't. Because it was right there, blazing across the back of the Omega, he'd just stripped naked in front of his entire court. Rengi's hand moved of its own accord, reaching toward the mark as if to confirm it was real. His fingers were inches from her skin when Anahara spoke, her voice cutting through his shock like a blade. "I warned you, Commander." She turned to face him, and Rengi stumbled backward. Because the Omega who'd been bound and submissive just moments ago was gone. In her place stood someone else entirely, someone whose silver eyes blazed with an authority that made his alpha instincts scream in confusion and recognition and terror. The silver ropes binding her wrists began to glow, heating from within. A moment later they fell away as ash, despite the fact that silver couldn't burn. "My name," she said, her voice resonating with power that pressed against every wolf in the hall, "is not Anahara Ngata. It is Anahara Aroha Kaimana, first of her name, bearer of the Phoenix mark, daughter of the House of Kaimana, and the rightful heir to the northern throne." She raised her hand, and light seemed to gather around her fingers, the kind of power that shouldn't exist, that belonged to stories and legends, not to the modern world. "And you, Commander Rengi Tamati, have just committed an act of treason against your crown princess." The hall erupted into chaos. But Rengi couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stare at the Omega. No, at the princess, and realize that everything he thought he knew about his world had just shattered beyond repair. The silence that followed Anahara's declaration was more terrifying than the chaos that preceded it. Rengi had commanded soldiers in battle. He'd faced rogue packs and enemy alphas who wanted nothing more than to see him dead. He'd stared down death more times than he could count and never flinched. But standing before this Omega, this princess, feeling the weight of centuries of bloodline authority pressing down on him, he understood what true fear meant. Because if she was real, if that mark was genuine, then he'd just committed one of the gravest crimes in pack law. Stripping a royal before a common court. Accusing her of treason when she was the very definition of legitimacy. Humiliating the one wolf whose word could command every pack in the Northern Territories. And if she wasn't real, if this was some elaborate trick, then he was looking at an enemy more dangerous than any he'd ever faced. "Prove it." The words left his mouth before he could stop them, rough and challenging. His alpha instincts refused to submit, even in the face of that power. Anyone could claim to be royal. That mark could be a tattoo, an illusion. "Give me proof that you're who you say you are." Anahara regarded him with an expression that might have been amusement or pity. "You're looking at the proof, Commander. The Phoenix mark cannot be faked. It's burned into the soul of every firstborn heir at the moment of their first breath, written in the language of the moon herself. Cannot be tattooed, cannot be copied, cannot be transferred. It simply is." "Legends and stories," Rengi shot back, even as doubt gnawed at his certainty. "The royal line died out 70 years ago. Everyone knows that. The coup killed many," Anahara interrupted, her voice hardening. "My grandfather, my grandmother, my father's siblings. But my grandmother was pregnant when the assassins came. The loyalists managed to get her out, managed to hide her long enough for my father to be born. He grew up in exile, stripped of his title, hunted by those who'd stolen his throne. She began to walk forward, and wolves scrambled to clear a path. Even naked, even small by wolf standards, she commanded the space like she owned it. Which, Rengi realized with growing dread, she technically did. My father spent his life in hiding, Anahara continued. moving from pack to pack under assumed names, always looking over his shoulder. He met my mother in a small pack on the southern coast, a healer, an omega like me. They had 3 years together before the hunters found them. Her voice didn't waver, but Rengi saw the flash of old pain in her eyes. I was 5 when I watched my parents die. 5 when the loyalists carried me away again, continuing the cycle of running and hiding. They raised me in secret, taught me what it meant to be royal even though I had no throne, no pack, no kingdom to rule. And when I was old enough, they told me the truth. The northern territories were suffering under the false alphas who'd seized power. Packs were at each other's throats. The old alliances were shattered. Peace was a memory. She stopped a few feet from Rengi, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her silver eyes. So I decided to come back. Not to wage war, not to demand immediate submission, but to see for myself what had become of my territories. I visited pack after pack under different names, learning, watching, gathering information about the state of my stolen kingdom. And then I came here to the Kahurangi pack, one of the most powerful in the north, commanded by a wolf with a reputation for honor and strength. Her lips curved into a smile that had no warmth in it. I wanted to see if that reputation was deserved. If you were the kind of alpha who could be trusted when the time came to reclaim what was mine. Instead, I found out that you're the kind of alpha who strips an omega naked before his court on nothing but suspicion. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Rengi's jaw clenched, anger and shame warring in his chest. You infiltrated my pack under false pretenses. You lied about who you were, gathered intelligence. I observed, Anahara corrected. And yes, I hid my identity because revealing it too soon would have gotten me killed. There are still those who hunt for any surviving royals, Commander. Those who benefit from the current chaos and would do anything to maintain it. She gestured around the hall, and Rengi realized that every wolf present was staring at her with varying expressions of shock, awe, and fear. The message you intercepted. Anahara continued. I was reaching out to other loyalists, letting them know I was alive and safe. That's all. No conspiracy against your pack, no espionage. Just a princess trying to navigate a world that thinks she doesn't exist. Rengi's mind raced, trying to process the implications, trying to find solid ground in a situation that felt like quicksand. And I'm just supposed to take your word for this. Accept that you're royalty because you have a mark on your back and a compelling story. No, Anahara said simply. You're supposed to use your senses, Commander. You're an alpha, one of the strongest I've ever encountered. Can't you feel it? The bloodline power. The pull of the royal line. Rengi wanted to deny it. Wanted to insist that he felt nothing unusual, that she was just another omega spinning a tale. But he couldn't. Because now that she'd pointed it out, he could feel it. A resonance deep in his bones, in his wolf, in the part of him that responded to hierarchy and dominance and bloodline strength. It was like standing near a massive electrical current, feeling the hum of power in the air even if you couldn't see it. And more than that, his wolf was responding in a way it never had before. Not with aggression or the usual push-pull of dominance contests. Instead, there was recognition, the instinctive urge to bow, to submit, to acknowledge a power greater than his own. It was wrong, unsettling, impossible, and absolutely, undeniably real. Even if you are who you claim to be, Rengi said slowly, fighting against every instinct that screamed at him to drop to one knee, the royal line abandoned these territories. The crown was forfeit when your grandfather failed to protect his pack. Anahara's eyes flashed. My grandfather was murdered by traitors. And the royal line didn't abandon anything. We were hunted like animals, forced into hiding to survive. But we're still here, Commander. Still legitimate. And still the rightful rulers of the northern territories, whether the current alphas like it or not. She turned to address the assembled court, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. I know this is shocking. I know you have no reason to trust me, to believe a stranger who appeared at your borders 3 months ago. But the Phoenix mark doesn't lie. It can't lie. You can bring in every elder, every historian, every wolf who remembers the old ways, and they'll all tell you the same thing. This mark is genuine. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Rengi saw wolves exchanging glances, saw Hannah approaching slowly with a blanket to cover Anahara's nakedness, a gesture of respect that made his stomach twist with guilt. Anahara accepted the blanket with a grateful nod, wrapping it around herself. The covering of the phoenix mark should have diminished her presence, but somehow it didn't. She still radiated that same quiet authority. "I'm not asking for immediate submission," Anahara continued. "I'm not demanding that you all bow and swear fealty right here and now. What I'm asking is that you consider the possibility. Consider what it would mean if the royal line could be restored. Real unity, not the fractured alliances that barely hold together. Real leadership, not the constant power struggles between packs. A return to the peace our ancestors knew before the coup tore everything apart." She turned back to Rengi, and he felt the weight of her gaze like chains. "What happens next is up to you, Commander. You can continue to treat me as an enemy, as a threat to be eliminated. You can spread word that I'm an imposter, try to turn the packs against me before I can gather support. Or..." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "Or you can be the first alpha to recognize the true heir, to stand with me instead of against me. The first to help me reclaim what was stolen from my family and bring real stability back to these territories." Rengi's fists clenched at his sides. Every alpha instinct in him rebelled against the idea of submission, of acknowledging anyone as his superior. He'd built his reputation on strength, on being unbending and uncompromising. But he'd also built it on honor, on doing what was right for his pack, no matter the personal cost. And if this Omega, this princess, was genuine, if the royal line truly had survived, then everything he thought he knew about pack politics was about to change. "I need time," he finally said. "Time to verify your claims, to consult with the pack elders too." "Of course," Anahara interrupted gently. "I wouldn't expect anything less. The phoenix mark can be examined by anyone with knowledge of the old magic. I'll submit to whatever tests you deem necessary." She smiled, and for the first time it reached her eyes. "But while you're investigating, Commander, I'll be living in your pack as an honored guest rather than a prisoner. Unless you want to compound your treason by continuing to treat your crown princess like a common criminal." It wasn't really a question. It was a challenge, thrown down with the kind of confidence that came from knowing she held all the power in this situation. Rengi wanted to refuse, wanted to insist on continued confinement until he'd gotten answers. But with the entire court watching, with the possibility, no matter how remote, that she was telling the truth, he couldn't risk it. "Fine," he ground out. "You'll have quarters in the main house, under guard for your safety as much as anything else. And you'll submit to examination by our eldest council members first thing tomorrow." "Acceptable," Anahara said. She turned to leave, then paused, glancing back over her shoulder at him. "Oh, and Commander, when you report this to Alpha Cora, you might want to emphasize that you were conducting a thorough security investigation. It sounds better than, 'I stripped the crown princess naked because I didn't like how many questions she asked.'" With that parting shot, she walked out of the hall, head high, leaving Rengi standing in the wreckage of his certainty and wondering how everything had gone so spectacularly, catastrophically wrong. Rengi didn't sleep that night. He sat in his private study, surrounded by ancient texts pulled from the pack's archives, trying to find any reference to the phoenix mark that might tell him whether Anahara was a genuine royal or the most skilled con artist he'd ever encountered. The problem was, everything he found supported her claim. The phoenix mark was mentioned in dozens of historical documents, always in the same context. The undeniable proof of royal blood, the symbol that appeared only on firstborn heirs of the Kaimana line. According to the texts, the mark was tied to ancient magic, the kind that predated modern pack society by millennia. It couldn't be faked, couldn't be transferred, couldn't be anything except exactly what it appeared to be. Which meant Anahara was telling the truth. Which meant he'd committed treason. The thought sat in his stomach like lead. A knock at his door pulled him from his spiraling thoughts. Enter. Hannah stepped in, her expression troubled. At 63, she was one of the oldest wolves in the pack and had been head healer since before Rengi was born. If anyone could give him straight answers, it was her. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. "Hard to sleep when your world's been turned upside down," Rengi replied. "Tell me I'm not crazy, Hannah. Tell me that mark could be fake." The old healer shook her head slowly. "I examined her, Rengi. With her permission. That's no tattoo, no illusion. It's part of her, woven into her very essence. I could feel the power radiating from it. Ancient power, the kind I've only read about in the oldest texts. So she's real." The words felt like ash in his mouth. "She's real," Hannah confirmed. The lost heir returned. "Do you have any idea what this means?" "It means I just publicly humiliated the one wolf who could unite all the northern packs under a single banner," Rengi said bitterly. "It means I've given her every reason to see me as an enemy when I should have been courting her as an ally. It means you made a mistake," Hannah interrupted gently. "A significant one, yes, but not irreparable. She could have destroyed you tonight, Rengi. Called down her power. Demanded immediate execution for your disrespect. Instead, she gave you a chance to make this right." Rengi leaned back in his chair, exhaustion pulling at him. "Why? If I were in her position, I wouldn't be nearly so forgiving." "Maybe because she needs allies more than she needs revenge," Hannah suggested. "Think about it, she's been in hiding her entire life, hunted by enemies, probably never knowing who she could trust. And despite all that, she came back here, to the heart of hostile territory, trying to assess whether the packs were ready to accept her." The healer leaned forward, her eyes intense. "She chose our pack specifically, Rengi. Out of all the territories she could have visited, she came here because she'd heard of your reputation. Your strength, yes, but also your fairness, your commitment to protecting the vulnerable. She was testing you, seeing if you were the kind of alpha who could help her reclaim her throne. And I failed the test spectacularly," Rengi muttered. "You didn't know who she was," Hannah pointed out. "You thought you were protecting the pack from a potential threat. That's not failure, that's doing your duty. You just need to show her that you can be flexible, that you can acknowledge when you're wrong and work to make amends." Rengi rubbed his face tiredly. "And how exactly do I make amends for what I did tonight?" "Start by treating her like the princess she is," Hannah said. "Give her the respect and resources she needs. Help her verify her identity to the other packs. And most importantly, listen to her. She's been watching us for months, Rengi. She knows our strengths and our weaknesses. If she's offering alliance, it's because she sees potential here." The healer stood, moving toward the door. But she paused on the threshold, looking back at him. "One more thing. That Omega, that princess, she's remarkable. Powerful, yes, but also kind. I saw how she treated the guards who helped with your orders. She didn't blame them, didn't hold them responsible for something they had no choice about. That kind of grace under pressure. That's the mark of a true leader." After Hannah left, Rengi sat in the darkness, thinking about everything she'd said. Thinking about the Omega who'd endured humiliation with dignity, who'd offered him a path forward instead of demanding his head. Thinking about those silver eyes and the way they'd looked at him, not with hatred, but with something that might have been disappointment. Somehow, that was worse than hatred would have been. As dawn broke over the mountains, Rengi made a decision. He couldn't undo what he'd done, couldn't take back the public humiliation he'd inflicted. But he could move forward differently. Could prove that his reputation for honor wasn't entirely undeserved. Could show the lost princess that the Kahurangi pack might just be the ally she needed. He just hoped it wasn't too late. Anahara stood on the balcony of her new quarters, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, and tried not to think about how badly the previous night had gone. She'd known revealing her identity would be dramatic. Had planned for shock, disbelief, even outright rejection. What she hadn't planned for was the soul-deep humiliation of being stripped before a room full of strangers, exposed in the most vulnerable way possible. The phoenix mark burned across her back. Not literally, but she was constantly aware of it now, as if Rengi's eyes were still on her skin. Part of her wondered if she should have handled it differently. Should have revealed who she was before things escalated to that point. But she'd been testing him, trying to see how he dealt with perceived threats, how he treated those weaker than himself. And she'd gotten her answer, hadn't she? Rengi Tamati was strong, decisive, and absolutely ruthless when he thought his pack was threatened, which could be valuable traits in an ally. If she could get past the memory of standing naked before his court, feeling his gaze cataloguing every inch of her skin like she was evidence to be examined. A knock at her door interrupted her brooding. "Come in." She expected Hannah, or maybe one of the guards assigned to watch her. She didn't expect Rengi himself, looking like he'd been awake all night, carrying a tray laden with breakfast foods. "Princess," he said formally. His deep voice carefully neutral. "May I come in?" Anahara gestured assent, noting how he'd positioned himself near the door, close enough to speak with her, far enough to maintain respectful distance. His wolf was subdued this morning, none of yesterday's aggressive dominance. He set the tray on the small table by the window. "I thought you might be hungry. The kitchen prepared everything you've shown preference for during your time here." "Thank you," Anahara said, genuinely surprised. She moved to the table, examining the spread. Fresh fruit, grilled fish, the honey cakes she'd once mentioned enjoying. Someone had been paying attention. "I also wanted to apologize," Rengi continued, and now she heard the strain in his voice, saw the tension in his shoulders. "For last night." He swallowed hard. "For what I did to you. There's no excuse that makes it acceptable. I thought I was protecting my pack, but I crossed a line. Multiple lines." Anahara studied him, searching for any hint of insincerity. But all she saw was genuine regret, the kind that came from a wolf who'd realized he'd violated his own code of honor. "You didn't know who I was," she said finally. "That doesn't matter." Rengi's hands clenched at his sides. "You were an Omega, accused but not proven guilty. You deserve to be treated with dignity regardless of your identity. Instead, I humiliated you publicly because I was frustrated and suspicious and—" He exhaled sharply. "And I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong." The admission clearly cost him. Anahara could see how much his pride was choking on the words, how much it hurt his alpha nature to confess weakness. Which made the apology all the more valuable. "Apology accepted," she said quietly. "Though I have conditions." Rengi's head came up, wariness flickering in his eyes. "Name them." "First, this can never happen again. Not to me, not to any Omega in your pack. What you did last night, stripping someone as punishment or investigation, that practice ends now." "Agreed," Rengi said immediately. "Second, you help me verify my identity to the other packs. I need allies, Commander, and your reputation carries weight in these territories. If you stand with me, others will be more likely to listen." Rengi hesitated, and Anahara could see the war playing out behind his eyes. Alpha pride versus strategic thinking versus whatever moral code he operated by. "I'll need to verify your identity to my own satisfaction first," he said finally. "I owe that to my pack. But if the examination confirms what I already suspect, that you are who you claim to be, then yes, I'll stand with you." "Fair enough," Anahara agreed. "And third," she moved closer to him, noting how he forced himself not to step back, not to retreat despite the discomfort written across his features. "Third, you trust me. Not completely, not immediately, but enough to actually listen when I speak. Enough to consider that I might know things about these territories that you don't. Enough to believe that I'm here to help, not to harm." Rengi met her eyes, and for a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Anahara saw the intelligence there, the strength, but also the wounds, whatever had made him so suspicious, so quick to assume the worst. "I can do that," he said finally. "Or at least I can try." That's all I ask, Anahara replied. She returned to the table, selecting a honey cake and taking a bite. It was delicious, perfectly prepared, and she realized she was actually hungry despite the emotional turmoil of the past 12 hours. The council will meet this afternoon, Rengi said, still standing by the door. Our 3 eldest members, all of whom remember the royal line from their youth. They'll examine the mark, ask you questions about your family history, verify your identity through methods passed down through generations. I'll be ready, Anahara assured him. And Alpha Korra has been informed, Rengi continued. She'll be arriving tonight to handle this situation personally. That made Anahara sit up straighter. Korra Tawiri, Alpha of the Kahurangi pack, was a legend in her own right, one of the few female alphas in the Northern Territories, known for being brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely uncompromising in defense of her pack. If Korra decided Anahara was a threat, well, even royal blood wouldn't protect her from a territorial alpha. I look forward to meeting her, Anahara said, keeping her voice steady. Rengi's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, princess. Korra doesn't react well to surprises, and you've just delivered the biggest surprise in pack history. Then it's good I have her trusted commander on my side, isn't it? Anahara countered. The look Rengi gave her was complicated. Part respect, part wariness, part something else she couldn't quite identify. I'm not on your side yet, he said. But I'm not against you either. Let's call it cautious neutrality until we know more. I'll take it, Anahara said. After Rengi left, she finished her breakfast slowly, thinking about the man who just apologized to her with such obvious difficulty. There was something about him that intrigued her beyond the obvious attraction. And yes, she could admit to herself that the commander was devastatingly attractive, even when he was being a complete bastard. But it was more than that. She'd watched him for months, studied how he led his warriors, how he interacted with the pack. He was tough but fair, demanding but loyal. The kind of alpha who inspired genuine respect rather than fear-based obedience. The kind of alpha who could be a powerful ally in reclaiming her throne, if she could get him to fully trust her. The council examination that afternoon was exactly as uncomfortable as Anahara had expected. 3 ancient wolves, 2 men and 1 woman, all well past their centennial birthdays, examined her phoenix mark with a thoroughness that made yesterday's public stripping seem almost modest in comparison. They poked, prodded, whispered in old tongue, and performed what Anahara recognized as verification rituals from the old magic. Rengi stood in the corner, watching silently, his expression unreadable. Finally, the eldest, a man named Wiremu who claimed to have actually met her grandfather once, stepped back with a deep sigh. It's genuine, he announced. As genuine as the sun in the sky. This is the royal mark, no doubt about it. He turned to Anahara, and she saw tears in his ancient eyes. Forgive an old wolf, princess, but I never thought I'd see this mark again in my lifetime. Your grandfather. He was a good alpha, strong leader. His death broke something in these territories that never quite healed. I know, Anahara said softly. My father told me stories. About the peace, the unity, the way the packs work together instead of constantly fighting for dominance. It can be that way again, the old woman, Aroha, ironically sharing Anahara's middle name, said firmly. If you're strong enough, if you're smart enough, if you can convince the other packs that you're worth following. That's the plan, Anahara replied. Then you'll need allies, the 3rd elder Meishu said. He glanced at Rengi. Strong ones, respected ones, ones who can vouch for your legitimacy and help gather support. The implication was clear, and Anahara watched Rengi's face carefully. The commander stepped forward, his posture rigid. The council has verified her identity. As far as I'm concerned, that settles the question of whether she's genuine. The question now is what we do about it. You acknowledge her claim? Wiremu asked, his voice sharp. I acknowledge the facts, Rengi said carefully. She is who she says she is. The royal line survived. That doesn't automatically mean every pack will accept her rule, but it does mean she deserves a chance to make her case. It wasn't a ringing endorsement, but it was more than Anahara had hoped for. She caught Rengi's eye and gave him a small nod of appreciation. What about Alpha Korra? Aroha pressed. What will she say when she arrives? That, said a new voice from the doorway, is an excellent question. Everyone turned to see a woman striding into the room, her presence commanding immediate attention. She was tall for a female wolf, nearly 6 feet, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a severe braid and eyes that missed nothing. Her age was hard to guess. Somewhere between 40 and 60, with a kind of timeless strength that came from decades of alpha dominance. Alpha Korra Tawiri had arrived. And from the expression on her face, she was not pleased. Korra's gaze swept the room, cataloguing each person present before finally settling on Anahara. The weight of that stare was immense. Not hostile exactly, but evaluating in a way that made Anahara acutely aware she was being measured against some internal standard. So, Korra said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that came from 30 years of alpha rule. The lost princess returned from the dead. How very dramatic. Alpha Korra, Anahara said, bowing her head in a gesture of respect without quite submitting. It was a delicate balance. Acknowledge Korra's authority within her own pack while maintaining her own royal status. Thank you for seeing me. Did I have a choice? Korra moved further into the room, circling Anahara like a predator assessing potential prey. My commander calls me in the middle of the night, tells me he's discovered a royal heir in our midst, one he publicly humiliated before the entire court. Rather puts me in an awkward position. Rengi's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. I understand this situation is complicated, Anahara began, but Korra cut her off with a gesture. Complicated. Princess, this is a political nightmare wrapped in a diplomatic disaster. If you're genuine, and the elders seem to think you are, then we've just committed treason against the crown. If you're a fraud, then we're harboring an enemy agent who somehow managed to fake the unfakeable. Either way, my pack is at risk. I have no intention of putting your pack at risk, Anahara said firmly. I came here seeking allies, not enemies. I've been watching this pack for months, Alpha Korra, and I've been impressed by what I've seen. Strong leadership, loyal wolves, a community that actually functions instead of tearing itself apart with internal politics. Flattery. Korra's eyebrow rose. Really? Observation, Anahara corrected. And strategic thinking. If I'm going to reclaim my throne, I need packs that can serve as a foundation. Packs that are stable, well-led, and respected by others. The Kahurangi pack checks all those boxes. Korra studied her for a long moment, then turned to the elders. You've verified the mark. Beyond any doubt, Wiremu confirmed. This is the heir, Korra. The true bloodline. And the historical knowledge. Anyone can claim to be royal, mark or not. She knows things only someone raised by the loyalists would know, Aroha added. Names, dates, rituals that haven't been practiced in 70 years. She's not just wearing the mark, she was trained to be royal. Korra nodded slowly, then surprised everyone by laughing, a short, sharp bark of sound that held no humor. Well, isn't this perfect? We finally have a princess, and my idiot commander decides to strip her naked in front of the court. Do you have any idea how much diplomatic damage control I'm going to have to do, Rengi? Yes, Alpha, Rengi said tightly. I take full responsibility. Oh, you'll take responsibility all right, Korra interrupted. But we'll discuss your punishment later. Right now, we need to figure out what to do with our unexpected guest. She turned back to Anahara, and her expression softened slightly. Here's the reality, Princess. I believe you are who you claim to be. But believing and acting on that belief are two different things. The last time anyone tried to unite the northern packs under royal authority, it ended in a bloodbath. A lot of the current alphas like their independence. They're not going to just roll over and accept a monarchy again. I know, Anahara said. That's why I've been moving quietly, assessing the situation before making any grand announcements. I needed to understand what I was walking into. Smart, Cora acknowledged. But now you've been exposed. By tomorrow, word will spread to every pack in the territory. Some will be thrilled. The old families who remember the royal line, who've been waiting for this day. Others will see you as a threat to their power and will want you dead. The blunt assessment sent a chill down Anahara's spine, but she kept her expression neutral. So what do you suggest? She asked. Cora moved to the window, looking out over the packlands. We go on the offensive. You stay here under our protection while we reach out to potential allies. We verify your identity to trusted alphas, build a coalition before your enemies can organize against you. It'll be faster than your quiet approach, more dangerous, but it's our best shot now that the secret's out. You're offering me sanctuary. Anahara couldn't quite hide her surprise. I'm offering you a strategic partnership, Cora corrected. You need protection and legitimacy. Well, let's just say that a pack with close ties to the crown would have significant advantages when the political landscape inevitably shifts. It's practical, not altruistic. Anahara found herself smiling despite the tension. I appreciate the honesty, Alpha. Good, because I don't have time for games. Cora turned back to face her. But I need something from you in return. Full transparency. No more secrets, no more hidden agendas. If you're staying under my protection, I need to know everything. Who your allies are, who your enemies are, what your actual plans are for reclaiming the throne. It was a reasonable request, but it still made Anahara hesitate. She'd spent her entire life guarding her secrets, trusting no one completely. Opening up to relative strangers went against every survival instinct she'd developed. But Cora was right, the situation had changed. She needed allies more than she needed secrets now. Agreed, Anahara said. Though some of the information I have. It's sensitive. Perhaps we should discuss it privately. Of course. Cora glanced at the elders. Thank you for your service. This meeting is concluded. Then to Rengi. Commander, you stay. I want you to hear this too. After the elders filed out, Cora gestured to the chairs. Sit. Convince me that betting my pack's future on a lost princess isn't the stupidest decision I've ever made. For the next 3 hours, Anahara told them everything. She started with her childhood, the fragments of memory from before her parents died, the years of running and hiding with the loyalists, the careful education in history and politics, and the magic that ran through royal blood. She told them about the network of supporters scattered across the territories, old families who'd never stopped believing the royal line would return. How many? Cora asked. How many wolves can you actually count on? Directly. Maybe 300 spread across a dozen packs, Anahara admitted. But that's counting only the ones I know about personally. The loyalists operate in cells, compartmented for security. There could be twice that many who I haven't been directly in contact with. Rengi leaned forward, his tactical mind clearly engaged. That's not enough to take the throne by force. Not against the combined strength of the alphas who'll oppose you. I don't want to take the throne by force, Anahara said firmly. That would just repeat the cycle of violence that got us here in the first place. I need to be accepted, not feared. I need the packs to choose unity over independence. That's a beautiful ideal, Cora said dryly. But how exactly do you plan to make that happen? The alphas who overthrew your grandfather didn't do it because they hated monarchy in principle. They did it because they wanted power for themselves. Those same families still hold influence today. They're not going to give that up willingly. No, but their children might, Anahara countered. Or their wolves. The generation that participated in the coup is dying out. The wolves in power now mostly inherited their positions. They've spent their entire lives dealing with the chaos and instability that came after. Some of them might be ready for something different. She pulled a folded map from her bag, one she'd been carefully marking over the months of her travels. Look at the territory boundaries, she said, spreading it on the table. See how they've shifted. Pack lands that used to be stable for centuries have changed hands multiple times in the last 50 years. There's no consistency, no security. Every alpha is constantly looking over their shoulder, waiting for the next challenge, the next territorial dispute, the next war. Her finger traced the borders. But here, the packs that maintain the old alliances, that kept trade agreements and diplomatic relationships, they're more stable, stronger. The Kahurangi pack is a perfect example. You've kept peace with your neighbors through negotiation rather than constant warfare. Your economy is better for it. Your wolves are better fed. Your territory is more secure. You're suggesting that stability is its own argument for restoration, Rengi said, understanding dawning in his eyes. Exactly. I'm not offering tyranny or forced submission. I'm offering what the royal line originally provided. A framework for cooperation. Neutral arbitration of disputes. Coordinated defense against external threats. Trade networks that benefit everyone instead of just the strongest packs. Cora studied the map thoughtfully. It's a good pitch. But you're still missing one crucial element. What's that? Proof that you can actually lead. Cora's gaze was sharp. You have the bloodline, yes. You have the mark. But you've spent your entire life in hiding, never actually ruling anything. How do we know you're capable of wielding the power you're claiming? The question hit harder than Anahara expected, because it was the same doubt she'd wrestled with in private moments. She had the blood, the training, the theoretical knowledge. But Cora was right, she'd never actually led a pack, never made the hard decisions that came with real power. You don't know, Anahara admitted. Not for certain. But that's what this process is about, isn't it? Proving myself not just by birthright but by action. Showing the packs that I can be the leader they need. And how do you plan to do that? Ringi asked. Anahara looked between them, measuring, then made a decision. I want to start here, she said. In the Kahurangi pack. Not as a ruler but as a member. I want to work alongside your wolves, contribute to the pack's well-being. Show that I'm willing to earn respect rather than just demand it. Cora's eyebrows rose. You want to join my pack? Formally. As a temporary member, yes. With your permission. Anahara turned to Rengi. The commander was right to be suspicious of me before. I was hiding who I was, observing from the outside. But if I'm going to ask wolves to trust me with power, I need to show that I trust them first. I need to be part of a pack, not just someone claiming authority over them. She could see the surprise on both their faces and something else. Consideration, maybe even approval. It's clever, Cora admitted. If nothing else, it would give you credibility when we start reaching out to other packs. The princess who chose to serve before she ruled. Good optics. It's more than optics, Anahara insisted. I've spent months watching this pack from the outside. I want to understand it from the inside. The challenges you face, the solutions you've implemented, the relationships that hold the community together. That knowledge will help me be a better leader when I reclaim the throne. Rengi was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. And you'd accept pack hierarchy. Follow orders, including from those who outrank you. Within reason, yes. I'm not going to compromise my safety or my mission, but I'm willing to prove that I can function as part of a team rather than just issuing commands from on high. There was a long silence as Cora and Rengi exchanged glances, some wordless communication passing between Alpha and Commander. Finally Cora nodded. All right, we'll do it. You'll join the pack formally, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. But I have conditions. Name them. First, you work directly with Rengi. He'll be your supervisor, your trainer, and your protection detail. If you're going to be part of this pack, you need to understand how we operate, and no one knows that better than my commander. Anahara glanced at Rengi, whose expression had gone carefully blank. Working closely with the man who'd stripped her naked less than 24 hours ago should have been uncomfortable. But looking at him now, seeing the intelligence and honor beneath the rough exterior, she found herself intrigued rather than apprehensive. Acceptable, she said. Second, you don't get special treatment. You're an Omega, yes, and we'll respect that. But you're also claiming to be a future leader. That means no hiding behind your designation when things get hard. You pull your weight like everyone else. I wouldn't want it any other way. And third, Cora's voice hardened, if we discover that any of this is a lie, if you're playing us for fools, if your presence puts my pack in danger, I will end you myself. Royal blood or not. Are we clear? Anahara met the Alpha's eyes steadily. Perfectly clear. And for what it's worth, Alpha, I respect your caution. It's exactly the kind of protective instinct a good leader should have. Cora's lips twitched. You're either very brave or very good at manipulation. I haven't decided which yet. Maybe both, Anahara suggested with a small smile. That actually got a laugh from the Alpha. All right, Princess. Welcome to the Kahurangi pack. Try not to cause any more diplomatic incidents in your first week. She stood, signaling the meeting was over. Rangi, get her settled in proper quarters. Not the guest rooms, something for a permanent pack member. And tomorrow you start her training. I want daily reports on her progress. Yes, Alpha, Rangi said. After Cora left, Anahara and Rangi stood in awkward silence for a moment. So, Anahara said finally, I guess we're going to be spending a lot of time together. Looks that way, Rangi replied. His expression was still guarded, but she thought she detected a hint of something. Interest, maybe. Or possibly just resignation to an impossible situation. For what it's worth, Anahara continued, I meant what I said about earning respect. I'm not expecting you to treat me differently just because of who I am. Good, Rangi said. Because I won't. In my training sessions everyone is equal. Which means you'll be getting up at dawn for conditioning runs, learning defensive techniques, and probably getting knocked on your ass more times than you can count. Despite everything, Anahara found herself smiling. Looking forward to it, Commander. The look he gave her suggested he thought she was crazy. He might have been right. The pre-dawn air was crisp and cold as Anahara joined the warriors assembling in the training yard. She'd been in the Kahurangi pack for a week now, and this would be her first session with Rengi's advanced combat group. She was terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. Around her, wolves were stretching, checking equipment, exchanging the kind of easy banter that came from years of training together. They'd accepted her presence with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism, but no one had been openly hostile. Not after Alpha Cora made it clear that Anahara was under pack protection. Morning, Princess, called out Pania, the female warrior who'd been one of the guards during that disastrous court scene. To Anahara's surprise, Pania had sought her out afterwards to apologize, and they'd actually become tentative friends. Just Anahara in training, she replied, fastening the last strap on her protective gear. Save the titles for formal occasions. If you say so, Pania grinned. Though I have to warn you, Rengi doesn't go easy on anyone. Being royal won't save you from getting your tail kicked. That's what I'm hoping for, Anahara said honestly. Can't learn if no one actually challenges me. A low whistle cut through the chatter, instantly silencing the assembled wolves. Rengi strode into the training yard, and Anahara was struck again by the sheer presence of the man. He moved like violence contained, every step purposeful, every gesture economical. Morning, he said, his voice carrying easily across the space. We've got a new trainee today, as you all know. Princess Anahara will be participating in our advanced sessions. She's packed now, which means she gets treated like everyone else. No special consideration, no pulling punches. Everyone clear. A chorus of yes, Commander echoed back. Rengi's eyes found Anahara's. That includes you, Princess. You tap out if you need to, but don't expect me to stop just because you're Omega or Royal. We train at full intensity because that's what keeps us alive in real combat. Understood, Commander, Anahara replied formally. The session started with conditioning, a brutal circuit of exercises that had Anahara's muscles screaming within minutes. Burpees, mountain climbers, weighted sprints. The other warriors moved through them with practiced ease while she struggled to keep pace. By the time they moved to combat drills, she was already exhausted. "Pair up," Rengi ordered. "We're working on defense against larger opponents today. Omegas, smaller wolves. You need to know how to use leverage and speed when you can't match someone's strength for strength." Anahara found herself facing Wiremu, a young warrior who had at least 6 inches and 50 pounds on her. He looked apologetic. "I'll try to be careful," he murmured. "Don't," Anahara said firmly. "The commander's right. I need to learn this properly." The drill started, and within seconds, Anahara was on the ground, Wiremu's weight pinning her down. He'd moved so fast she'd barely registered the attack. "Reset," Rengi called. Again. Again she ended up on the ground. And again. And again. By the 20th repetition, Anahara's body was one massive bruise, her pride equally battered. But she was starting to see patterns in Wiremu's attacks, starting to anticipate his movements. On the 25th attempt, she managed to sidestep his initial grab and use his momentum to throw him off balance. She didn't actually take him down. He recovered too quickly, but she'd avoided being immediately pinned. "Progress. Better," Rengi said, suddenly beside her. "You're thinking instead of just reacting. But you're telegraphing your movements. Watch." He gestured for Wiremu to stand back, then faced Anahara himself. "Attack me," he said. Anahara hesitated. Rengi was even larger than Wiremu, more experienced, and frankly intimidating as hell. "That's an order, princess," Rengi said, a hint of challenge in his voice. "Fine." Anahara lunged, aiming for the same grab-and-throw technique she'd just started to master. Rengi moved like liquid, flowing around her attack, and suddenly she was airborne. She hit the mat hard, breath driven from her lungs. Rengi's hand pressed firmly against her sternum to keep her down. "See," he said, not even winded. "You shifted your weight before you moved. Gave away your intention. In a real fight, that split second of warning is the difference between winning and dying." He offered her a hand up, and Anahara took it, trying to ignore the way her skin tingled where their palms touched. "How do I stop telegraphing?" she asked. "Practice. Lots of practice." Rengi's expression softened slightly. "But you're learning faster than most. Wiremu, work with her on the counter techniques. Princess, focus on staying light on your feet, keeping your weight centered." The session continued for another hour, brutal and exhausting and absolutely exhilarating. By the time Rengi called the end, Anahara could barely stand, her legs shaking with exhaustion. But she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. "Good work today," Rengi said as the other warriors dispersed. "You kept up better than I expected." "High praise," Anahara said dryly, wincing as she stretched sore muscles. "I don't give false praise," Rengi replied. "But I also don't give false criticism. You've got natural instincts, good reflexes. The technique will come with time and practice." He paused, then added, "You impressed them today. The warriors. They expected a pampered princess who'd quit after the first 10 minutes. Instead, they saw someone willing to take a beating and keep getting back up. That matters." Warmth bloomed in Anahara's chest at the acknowledgement. "That's all I wanted. A fair chance to prove myself." "You're getting it," Rengi said. Then, almost reluctantly, "How's your back? The phoenix mark. Does it hurt when you train?" The question surprised her. She'd expected him to avoid any reference to that night, to pretend it never happened. "No, it doesn't hurt. It's just a birthmark, ultimately. Part of me." Rengi nodded, but his eyes held something complicated. Guilt, maybe, mixed with fascination. "I've been meaning to ask. Can you feel it? The royal power, I mean. The magic that supposedly comes with the bloodline." It was a personal question, one that showed genuine curiosity rather than just tactical interest. Anahara considered how much to reveal. "Yes," she said finally. "Not all the time, but in certain moments. It's like an awareness of the wolves around me. Their emotions, their pack bonds, the hierarchies that connect them. The royal gift isn't about controlling others. It's about understanding them, sensing the health of the pack structure. That's how you knew so much about us, Rengi realized. During those months you were watching. You weren't just observing behaviors. You were reading pack dynamics at a deeper level. Exactly. And that's why I knew the Kahurangi pack was special. Your bonds are strong, your hierarchy is stable. Your wolves genuinely respect their leaders. That's rare, Commander. Rengi looked uncomfortable with the praise, but also pleased. We work hard to maintain those bonds. It shows. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, and Anahara realized something had shifted between them. The hostility was gone, replaced by something that felt like the beginning of mutual respect. Maybe even the beginning of friendship. Same time tomorrow, she asked. Same time, Rengi confirmed. And Princess, bring extra padding. Tomorrow we work on close combat techniques, and they're going to hurt worse than today. Looking forward to it, Anahara said with a grin. As she walked back toward the pack house, muscles aching and spirit soaring, she allowed herself a moment of hope. Maybe this would work. Maybe she really could prove herself, earn the trust of wolves like Rengi, build the foundation she needed to reclaim her throne. Maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found the place where she belonged. 3 weeks into her time with the Kahurangi pack, Anahara was finally starting to feel like she belonged. She'd established routines, morning training with Rengi's warriors, afternoons helping Hannah in the healing center, evenings studying pack records and historical documents with the elders. The wolves had stopped treating her like a curiosity and started treating her like one of their own. Well, most of them. There were still those who looked at her with suspicion, who whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. And she'd caught wind of rumors spreading to other packs, some positive, some decidedly not. Several alphas had already sent messengers demanding to know if the reports of a royal heir were true. Korra was handling the diplomatic fallout with characteristic efficiency, but the pressure was building. Soon, Anahara would have to step into the wider political arena whether she felt ready or not. But for now, she was enjoying a rare quiet moment in the pack library, surrounded by old texts about royal history, when Rengi found her. "We need to talk," he said, his expression grim. Anahara immediately set aside her book. "What's wrong?" "Intelligence report just came in. There's a group of wolves asking questions about you at the border packs. Professional questions, the kind that suggest they're not just curious. They're hunting." The blood drained from Anahara's face. "The assassins. They've found me." Rengi nodded. "Looks that way. Our scouts estimate maybe 6 to 8 wolves, all trained fighters. They're being subtle about it, but they're definitely tracking someone. And given the timing." "It's me," Anahara finished. She stood, mind racing through possibilities. "I need to leave. If I stay, I put the entire pack at risk." "Absolutely not," Rengi said firmly. "You're under our protection. That means something. It means you could all die because of me." Anahara's voice rose, fear and guilt warring in her chest. "I've seen what these hunters can do, Rengi. They killed my parents. They've killed every royal heir they've ever found. I won't let them slaughter your pack to get to me." Rengi crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders. The touch was firm but gentle, grounding. "Listen to me, Princess. We knew this was a possibility when we agreed to shelter you. Korra knew, I knew, every wolf in this pack knew. And we made the choice anyway because protecting you is the right thing to do. But, no buts, you're pack now. Which means when someone threatens you, they threaten all of us. And we don't abandon our own." The conviction in his voice, the absolute certainty, made Anahara's throat tight with emotion. She'd spent so long relying only on herself, trusting no one completely, that this level of loyalty felt almost foreign. "What do we do?" she asked. "We prepare," Rengi said grimly. "I'm doubling patrols, securing all entry points, bringing in warriors from our allied packs. If these hunters want to get to you, they'll have to go through every wolf in the Kahurangi pack first." He released her shoulders, stepping back. "But I need you to work with me on this. Tell me everything you know about these hunters. Their tactics, their capabilities, anything that might help us defend against them." For the next hour, Anahara shared everything she'd learned over the years. The hunters' preferred methods of attack, their use of silver weapons, the way they isolated their targets before striking. It was painful, dredging up memories of her parents' deaths, but Rengi listened with complete focus, asking sharp tactical questions. "They'll try to draw you out," he said finally. "Create a situation where you have to leave the pack house, then ambush you in transit." "So I stay inside?" Anahara asked. "For now, yes. At least until we've identified all the hunters and neutralized the threat." Rengi's expression darkened. "I won't lie to you, this is going to get dangerous. There's a good chance we'll have to fight them directly. People could die." "People could die," he acknowledged. "But Anahara, and I'm using your name because I need you to really hear this, you're worth protecting. Not just because you're royal, not just because you're the key to potentially uniting the territories, but because you're a good person who deserves to live without constantly looking over her shoulder." The sincerity in his voice made something crack in Anahara's chest. "How can you say that? You barely know me. I've known you for weeks now. I've trained with you, watched how you interact with the pack, seen how much you care about everyone here. I've seen your strength, your resilience, your compassion." Rengi's dark eyes held hers. "And I've learned enough to know that losing you would be a tragedy for more reasons than just politics." The air between them felt charged, electric. Anahara's wolf stirred, responding to the intensity of his presence, to the protective instinct rolling off him in waves. This was dangerous in a completely different way than the hunters. Because somewhere along the way, she'd started to care about Rengi as more than just an ally. Started to notice the way his rare smiles transformed his face, the gentleness he showed despite his warrior exterior, the sharp intelligence behind his tactical mind. Started to feel things an Omega princess probably shouldn't feel for an Alpha commander. "Rengi," she began, not sure what she was about to say. The moment shattered as Pania burst into the library, her face pale. "Commander! The hunters, they're at the main gate. They're demanding to speak with Alpha Korra." Rengi's expression went ice-cold, the warrior taking over. "How many?" "7 that we can see. But they're flying a parley flag. They say they're here to negotiate, not fight." "It's a trick," Anahara said immediately. "The hunters don't negotiate. They kill." "Maybe," Rengi agreed. "But if they're at our gate under parley, we have to at least hear them out. Pack law demands it." He turned to Pania. "Alert Korra, gather the senior warriors. Full defensive positions, but don't engage unless they attack first." Pania nodded and ran off. Rengi looked back at Anahara. "You stay here. Don't leave this building for any reason. I'm posting guards at every entrance." "You're going out there," Anahara realized, fear spiking through her. "I'm commander. It's my job to protect this pack. By walking into a potential ambush. By showing these hunters that we're not afraid of them." Rengi's hand came up, almost but not quite touching her cheek. "Trust me, princess. I've survived worse than a few assassins." Before Anahara could respond, he was gone, leaving her alone with her racing heart and the terrible certainty that everything was about to go very wrong. Anahara paced the library like a caged animal, every instinct screaming at her to go to the gate, to see what was happening, to not leave Rengi and the others to face her enemies alone. But she'd promised to stay put. And breaking that promise would distract Rengi at exactly the moment he needed full focus. Still, the waiting was torture. Through the window, she could see wolves moving into defensive positions across the compound. The pack house had been built with security in mind. Thick stone walls, elevated position, clear sight lines in all directions. If it came to a fight, this would be a defensible location. Small comfort when the people she'd come to care about were putting themselves between her and trained killers. Hannah appeared in the doorway, her healer's bag slung over one shoulder. "Come on, princess. If there's going to be trouble, We need to prepare the medical station. I should be out there, Anahara said, frustration bleeding into her voice. You should be wherever Commander Rengi told you to be, Hannah replied firmly. That man has kept this pack safe through countless threats. Trust him to do his job. Reluctantly, Anahara followed the healer to the medical wing, where they began setting out supplies. Bandages, antiseptics, tools for removing silver if it came to that. The practical tasks helped calm her racing mind, gave her something to focus on besides the terrible scenarios playing out in her imagination. How long have you been with the pack? Anahara asked, needing the distraction of conversation. 42 years, Hannah said, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. I came here as a young healer, fell in love with the territory and the wolves, never left. Watched Rengi grow from a cocky teenager to the finest commander this pack has ever had. He's remarkable, Anahara said softly. Hannah glanced at her, a knowing look in her ancient eyes. Careful, princess. That's not just respect I'm hearing in your voice. Anahara felt heat rise in her cheeks. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? The old healer chuckled. I've lived long enough to recognize attraction when I see it. And the way you two look at each other during training sessions. Well, let's just say the entire pack has noticed. We're not, Anahara stammered. He's my trainer, my protector. Nothing more. If you say so, Hannah said, clearly unconvinced. But for what it's worth, you could do worse than Rengi Tamati. He's loyal to his bones, honorable even when it costs him, and despite that gruff exterior, he has one of the kindest hearts I've ever known. Before Anahara could respond, shouting erupted from outside. Both women rushed to the window, and what Anahara saw made her blood run cold. At the main gate, 7 wolves in dark tactical gear stood in a loose formation. They looked exactly like the hunters who'd killed her parents. Professional, deadly, completely calm. And at their head, speaking with Alpha Korra and Rengi, was a face Anahara recognized from her nightmares. Kainwetu, the head of the hunter organization, the wolf responsible for more royal deaths than anyone else in history. He'd been hunting her family for 3 generations, driven by some fanatical belief that the royal bloodline was a corruption that needed to be purged. That's him, Anahara breathed. The one who killed my parents. Hannah's hand gripped her shoulder. Stay here. Don't let him see you. But even from this distance, Anahara could see the conversation at the gate growing heated. Rengi's posture was rigid, aggressive. Korra's arms were crossed, her expression thunderous. Whatever Tane was saying, the pack leaders weren't accepting it. Then everything happened at once. One of the hunters moved, a subtle shift of weight that Anahara recognized from years of watching for threats. He was going for a weapon, not attacking openly, but positioning himself for violence. No! Anahara started for the door, but Hannah grabbed her. You can't! The explosion cut off her words. The main gate erupted in fire and smoke, the blast wave shattering windows across the compound. Anahara was thrown backward, ears ringing. Hannah's body shielding hers from the worst of the flying glass. When the smoke cleared enough to see, chaos reigned. The hunters had used the explosion as cover to attack in force. More of them were pouring through the destroyed gate. Not 7 but at least 20. The parley had been a distraction, a way to get close while the main force moved into position. And in the center of the fighting, Anahara could see Rengi, transformed into his massive wolf form, tearing into the hunters with controlled fury. Korra fought beside him, equally deadly, the two of them a synchronized unit of violence. But there were too many hunters, and they were being pushed back toward the packhouse. Toward Anahara. I have to help, Anahara said, shoving to her feet. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead, but she ignored it. I can't just hide while they fight for me. You're an Omega, Hannah protested. You're not trained for this kind of combat. I'm a Royal Omega, Anahara corrected, feeling the power stirring in her blood, ancient magic that had been dormant for too long. And these hunters are here because of me. It's time I stopped running. She could feel it now, the gift that came with a phoenix mark. Not physical strength. Omegas would never match alphas in that, but something else. The ability to sense pack bonds, to understand the connections between wolves, to influence the very structure of the hierarchy. To command. She'd never used this power before, too afraid of drawing attention, of revealing herself. But watching Rengi and the others risk their lives, she realized that fear no longer mattered. Anahara closed her eyes and reached out with her royal senses. She felt the pack bonds, strong and numerous, lines of loyalty and affection connecting every wolf in the Kahurangi pack to each other and to their alpha. Beautiful, intricate, powerful. And she felt the hunters, cold spots in the network, voids where pack bonds should be. They'd severed their connections, made themselves into weapons without attachment, without the vulnerability that came from caring about others. That was their mistake. Because pack bonds weren't weakness. They were strength multiplied. Anahara pulled on the power of the phoenix mark, letting it flow through her like liquid gold. She didn't command the pack. That would be a violation, an override of Korra's authority. Instead, she did something more subtle. She strengthened what was already there. Every bond in the Kahurangi pack suddenly burned brighter, deeper, more intense. Warriors who'd been flagging felt renewed energy. Wolves who'd been fighting individually suddenly moved with perfect coordination, instinctively understanding where their packmates needed them. And at the center of it all, Rengi felt the surge of power and knew exactly where it was coming from. Their eyes met across the battlefield. His wolf's amber gaze locking with her human silver, and something passed between them. Not words but understanding, trust, unity, partnership. Rengi's howl split the night, a sound of pure dominance and fury that froze the hunters mid-attack. The Kahurangi wolves answered, their voices joining in a chorus that spoke of unbreakable bonds and absolute determination. They fought with renewed ferocity, driving the hunters back, not just defending but conquering. And slowly, inexorably, the tide began to turn. Tainweta realized it too. Anahara saw the moment he understood he'd underestimated this pack, this commander, this situation. He called a retreat order in some coded language, and the hunters began to disengage, using smoke grenades and tactical positioning to cover their withdrawal. "After them!" someone shouted, but Rengi shifted back to human form, holding up a hand. "No," he commanded, his voice carrying. "Let them go. Our priority is securing the compound and treating the wounded." It was the right call. Pursuing hunters into unknown territory was a recipe for ambush. But Anahara could see the frustration on every wolf's face, the desire to end the threat permanently. As the adrenaline faded, Anahara became aware of the destruction around her. The gate was destroyed, several buildings were damaged, and wolves were scattered across the ground, some moving, some horribly still. "Healers!" Hannah's voice cut through the chaos. "Everyone who's injured, move to the medical wing. Critical cases first." Anahara helped where she could, using her Omega instincts to calm panicked wolves, to triage injuries, to hold the hands of those too hurt to do anything but endure. She lost track of time in the blur of blood and bandages and whispered comfort. It was only when Hannah physically pushed her into a chair that she realized she was swaying with exhaustion. "Your turn," the old healer said firmly. "Let me look at that head wound. Others need you more. Others are being handled. Still." As Hannah cleaned and bandaged the cut on her forehead, Anahara finally had a moment to process what had happened. She'd used her royal power for the first time, actively and consciously. And it had worked. Not perfectly, not overwhelmingly, but enough to make a difference. Enough to help save lives. "You did well today," Hannah said quietly. "Both as a healer and as something more." "They felt it," Anahara said. "The power. Now everyone will know for certain what I am." "They already knew," Hannah replied. "This just proved it. You're not just a princess in name, Anahara. You're a leader who steps up when her people need her. That's what matters." A commotion at the door made them both turn. Rengi strode in, still in human form, covered in blood and dirt and exhaustion. His eyes swept the room until they found Anahara, and something in his expression made her heart skip. "You used royal power," he said without preamble. "I had to help," Anahara said. "I couldn't just stand by while." She didn't get to finish the sentence because Rengi crossed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms, holding her with a desperation that spoke of fear and relief in equal measure. "Don't ever scare me like that again," he said roughly against her hair. "When I felt that power surge and realized you weren't safely locked away somewhere, I thought my heart would stop." Anahara's arms came up to wrap around his waist, and she let herself have this moment, let herself be held, be comforted, be valued beyond just her political utility. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "But I'm not sorry. If that makes sense." She felt more than heard his laugh, a rumble in his chest. "It makes perfect sense. Infuriating, terrifying sense." He pulled back just enough to look down at her, his hands cupping her face with surprising gentleness. "You saved lives today, Princess. The way you amplified our pack bonds. I've never felt anything like it. We were coordinated, connected, fighting like we'd trained together for years instead of weeks. That's the royal gift, isn't it? That's what the legends talked about." "It's part of it," Anahara confirmed. "The ability to strengthen pack bonds, to help wolves function as a true unit instead of just individuals sharing space. But Rengi, I didn't control anyone. I would never." "I know," he interrupted. "I felt the difference. You didn't command or override. You just made us better. Made us more of what we already were. That's a gift worth protecting." His thumb traced her cheekbone, and Anahara's breath caught at the intimacy of the gesture. "We need to talk," Rengi said. "About what happened today, about the hunters, about—" He hesitated. "About us. Us." Anahara's voice came out barely above a whisper. "There's an us, Princess. Don't pretend you haven't felt it too. This pull between us, this connection. It's more than just circumstances or politics. And after today, after almost losing you, I can't keep pretending it's just professional respect." Anahara's wolf was practically singing with joy at the admission, but her human mind knew all the complications this represented. "Rengi, I'm a royal Omega. You're an Alpha commander. There are rules about—" "Fuck the rules," Rengi said with unusual vehemence. "The rules were written by wolves who didn't understand what we're facing now. You're trying to rebuild an entire political system. You need allies, yes, but you also need someone who sees you. Really sees you. Not just the princess or the symbol, but the woman who gets back up no matter how many times she's knocked down. The woman who'd risk herself to save others. The woman who's brave and brilliant and stubborn as hell." His forehead rested against hers. "I see you, Anahara. And what I see, it terrifies me and draws me in equal measure." "I see you too," Anahara admitted. "And I feel the same way. But this is complicated. If there's something between us, it changes the political landscape. Other alphas might see it as favoritism, might accuse the Kahurangi pack of manipulating me for their own gain." "Let them," Rengi said. "We'll prove them wrong through actions, not words. But Anahara, I need to know, is this real for you? Or am I reading something into this situation that isn't there?" In answer, Anahara rose on her toes and kissed him. It was brief, chaste by most standards, but it felt like igniting a star. Every nerve in her body lit up with awareness, her wolf practically howling in triumph, the bond between them, one that had been forming over weeks of training and trust and shared danger, suddenly snapping into perfect clarity. When they broke apart, Rengi was staring at her with wonder and heat and something that looked a lot like devotion. "So that's a yes then," he said, his voice rough. "That's a yes," Anahara confirmed. "But we take this slow. We figure out the political implications. We make sure this doesn't hurt your pack or my mission." "Agreed." Rengi's smile was warm and real, transforming his usually stern features. "Slow. Measured. Completely reasonable." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Anahara felt slow and measured fly out the window. They were interrupted by a pointed cough from Hannah, who was trying and failing to hide her smile. "Not that I'm not thrilled to see young love blooming," the healer said dryly, "but we still have wounded wolves and a destroyed gate to deal with. The romance can wait until after the crisis management." Rengi and Anahara sprang apart like guilty teenagers, and Anahara felt heat flood her cheeks. "Right," Rengi said, clearing his throat. "Crisis first. Romance later." "Much later," Anahara agreed. But as Rengi left to deal with security concerns and Anahara returned to helping with the wounded, both of them were smiling in a way they hadn't before. Because despite the danger, despite the politics, despite everything working against them, they'd found something worth fighting for beyond just duty and destiny. They'd found each other. The attack had consequences that rippled through the northern territories like an earthquake. Word spread quickly. The royal heir was real, she was powerful, and she was under the protection of the Kahurangi pack. More importantly, she'd helped defend that pack against the notorious hunters, using gifts that hadn't been seen in generations. Responses varied wildly. Some packs sent emissaries immediately, eager to swear loyalty to the reborn royal line. These were mostly the smaller territories, packs that had suffered under the constant warfare and saw stability as more valuable than independence. Others sent threats, making it clear they had no intention of bowing to some jumped-up Omega with delusions of grandeur, Phoenix mark or not. And many simply watched and waited, trying to assess which way the wind was blowing before committing to either side. Cora handled the diplomatic flood with impressive skill, accepting pledges of loyalty while also opening channels of communication with the hostile packs. She was building a coalition carefully and methodically, with Anahara at the center of it. But it was exhausting work. 2 months after the hunter attack, Anahara sat in yet another meeting with yet another delegation, this one from a pack on the eastern border. They had concerns about trade routes, questions about how the royal line would handle territorial disputes, demands for assurances that their autonomy would be respected. All reasonable questions. All questions she'd answered a dozen times before. By the time the delegation left, politely non-committal, promising to consider their options, Anahara wanted nothing more than to shift into her wolf form and run until she couldn't think anymore. "You're getting better at this," Cora observed, leaning back in her chair. "Less defensive, more diplomatic. The first few delegations rattled you. Now you're holding your ground." "I'm learning," Anahara said. "Slowly. Faster than you think." The Alpha studied her thoughtfully. "You've changed since you came here, Princess. Grown into your role. Even the wolves who were skeptical at first are starting to see you as a real leader, not just a symbol." "I have good teachers," Anahara said, meaning it. "You have good instincts," Cora corrected. "We just helped you trust them." "But speaking of teachers..." Her expression turned knowing. "How are your training sessions with Rengi going?" Anahara felt her cheeks heat. Over the past 2 months, her relationship with Rengi had deepened in ways that were both wonderful and terrifying. They'd kept it quiet, professional in public, intimate only in private moments, but clearly not quiet enough if Cora knew. "Training is going well," she said carefully. "I'm sure it is." Cora's smile was genuinely amused. "Relax, Princess. I'm not here to lecture you about inappropriate relationships or political complications. You're both adults, you're both doing your jobs well, and frankly, I think the connection helps both of you." "You do. Rengi's been my commander for over a decade," Cora said. "I've seen him focused, dedicated, brilliant at tactics. But I've rarely seen him happy. Not truly happy. These past months, watching him with you. There's a lightness to him that wasn't there before." She leaned forward. "And you need someone who sees you as more than just a political asset. Someone who'll tell you when you're wrong, who'll challenge you, who'll stand beside you not because of what you represent but because of who you are. Rengi is that person for you." Anahara felt tears prick her eyes at the unexpected blessing. "Thank you, Alpha. Just be careful," Cora added. "When you officially claim the throne, and we both know that's coming, Your relationship will become public knowledge. You'll face criticism, accusations of favoritism, possibly even challenges to your legitimacy. Be prepared for that. We will be, Anahara promised. A knock at the door interrupted them. Rengi entered, his expression serious. We've received a message, he said without preamble. From Tain Wetu. He wants to meet. Lone. Says he has information about your family that you need to hear. Anahara's blood went cold. It's a trap. Obviously, Rengi agreed. But he sent the message through official channels, using proper parley protocols. If we refuse, it makes us look afraid. And word will spread. So we're trapped into meeting with the wolf who wants me dead, Anahara said bitterly. We're invited to a meeting where we maintain all the advantages, Cora corrected. We choose the location, set the security parameters, dictate the terms. If Tain wants to talk, he does it our way or not at all. Over the next week, they planned meticulously. The meeting would take place in neutral territory, a clearing midway between Kahurangi lands and the outer territories. Rengi would accompany Anahara with a full security detail hidden in the surrounding forest. Any sign of treachery, and they'd extract immediately. Still, as the day approached, Anahara couldn't shake her dread. You don't have to do this, Rengi said the night before, holding her close in the privacy of his quarters. We can refuse the meeting, deal with whatever political fallout comes. No, Anahara said, though she was terrified. If Tain really has information about my family, I need to hear it. And I need to look him in the eye. Show him that I'm not the scared child he's been hunting for decades. I'm the heir, and I'm not running anymore. Rengi's arms tightened around her. Then I'll be right there with you. Whatever he says, whatever happens, you're not facing this alone. The clearing was as neutral as promised. Open space, good sightlines, no obvious ambush points. Tain Wetu stood in the center, flanked by 2 guards. His expression unreadable. He was older than Anahara remembered, gray threading through his dark hair, lines carved deep around his eyes. But he still radiated danger, the predatory calm of a wolf who'd killed more times than he could count. Princess Anahara, he said as she and Rengi approached. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I didn't agree, Anahara replied coldly. I accepted your parley request because protocol demanded it. Say what you came to say, and then leave my territories. Something flickered in Tain's eyes. Surprise maybe at her directness. Very well. I came to tell you the truth about your family. About why we've hunted the royal line for 3 generations. I know why, Anahara said. You're fanatical purists who think the royal bloodline is corrupted, that we wield too much power. You've made your position very clear through murder. That's what you were told, Tain said. But it's not the whole truth. The royal line was corrupted, princess, but not in the way you think. Your grandfather made a deal with forces that should never have been touched. He used forbidden magic to enhance the royal gifts, to make his bloodline stronger, more powerful. And in doing so, he created something unstable. Something dangerous. That's a lie, Anahara said, but doubt crept into her voice. Is it? Tain gestured to her. The phoenix mark. Do you know why it burns gold instead of the traditional black? Why your gifts are stronger than any royal in recorded history? Your grandfather's bargain changed the bloodline itself. Made it more powerful, yes, but also more volatile. And that volatility threatens every pack in these territories. He took a step forward, and Rengi immediately moved to intercept, but Tain held up peaceful hands. I'm not here to harm you, princess. I'm here to offer you a choice. The hunters will stop pursuing you permanently if you agree to certain conditions. Binding magic that limits your power, prevents it from being passed to future generations. You can have your throne, your unity, your peace. Just agree to be the last of the royal line. You want me to end my own bloodline, Anahara said, disbelief and fury warring in her voice. I want to prevent a catastrophe that killed hundreds the last time it manifested, Tain countered. Your great-grandmother went mad with power in her final years. Started wars over perceived slights. Used her gifts to compel loyalty rather than earn it. That's what the enhanced royal blood does, princess. It corrupts absolutely, eventually. Anahara wanted to reject everything he was saying, wanted to call him a liar and walk away. But something in his voice, in his eyes, suggested he believed every word. Even if what you're saying is true, she said slowly. Even if my grandfather made a mistake, that doesn't justify killing my entire family. Children. Innocents. You've spilled so much blood. To prevent rivers of it, Tane said. But I'm offering you another path now. End the bloodline peacefully. Rule wisely and well for your natural lifetime. Then let the territories return to balanced pack governance. No more concentration of power in a single line. No more risk of another mad royal. And if I refuse? Tane's expression hardened. Then we continue hunting. Not just you but anyone you might have children with. Any heir you might produce. Because this ends with your generation, one way or another. The threat hung in the air, clear and uncompromising. Rengi stepped forward, his voice deadly. You threaten the princess and her future in the same breath you ask for parley. That violates. I speak truth, Tane interrupted. Uncomfortable truth, but truth nonetheless. The princess can verify everything I've said. Ask the eldest of the loyalists. The ones who remember your grandfather before the coup. Ask them about the forbidden magic, the deal he made. They know. They've always known. He turned to leave, then paused. You have time to decide, princess. But not infinite time. Every day you delay, more wolves hear about the royal heir returned. More wolves swear loyalty to you. And when you inevitably succumb to the corruption in your blood, all those wolves will suffer for it. I'm not corrupted, Anahara said, but her voice wavered. Not yet, Tane agreed. But power corrupts, princess. Enhanced power corrupts absolutely. It's only a matter of time. After he left, Anahara stood frozen in the clearing, Rengi's presence beside her the only thing anchoring her to reality. It's not true, Rengi said firmly. He's trying to manipulate you, so doubt. What if it is true? Anahara whispered. What if my grandfather did something terrible? What if I'm carrying the same corruption? Then we deal with it, Rengi said. Together. But Anahara, I've seen you use your power. You strengthen bonds, you help wolves connect. That's not corruption. That's exactly what these territories need. But what if it changes? What if years from now, I become what he described? Rengi turned her to face him. His hands on her shoulders. Then I'll be there to remind you who you really are. To pull you back if you start to drift. That's what partners do, what mates do. We keep each other grounded. He'd said it so casually, but the word hung between them with enormous weight. Is that what we are? Anahara asked. Mates. If you'll have me, Rengi said simply. I know the timing is terrible, the politics are complicated. And you've got enough on your plate without adding a mating bond. But Anahara, I love you. I've loved you since you stood in that council chamber, naked and humiliated, and still looked at me with more dignity and strength than I've ever possessed. I love your courage, your compassion, your stubborn refusal to give up. And I want to stand beside you, not just as your commander or your protector, but as your partner in everything. Tears streamed down Anahara's face. But for the first time in hours, they were good tears. I love you too, she said. And yes to being mates, to being partners, to facing whatever comes together. Their kiss was witnessed only by the trees and the hidden guards, but it sealed something that had been building for months. A bond deeper than politics, stronger than fear, more enduring than any threat. When they finally broke apart, Rengi's expression was determined. We'll investigate Tane's claims, he said. Talk to the loyalists, research your grandfather's history, find out the truth. And then we'll decide together how to move forward. But Anahara, whatever we discover, it doesn't change who you are. You're not defined by what your grandfather might have done or what your bloodline might carry. You're defined by the choices you make, the life you live, the leader you choose to be. How did I get so lucky to find you? Anahara asked. I ask myself the same question every day, Rengi replied with a rare, genuine smile. Now come on. We've got an alpha to inform that her commander is mating the royal heir, and I'm not sure which one of us she'll kill first. Despite everything, Anahara laughed. The coronation ceremony was held in the ancient amphitheater, where the royal line had been crowned for 8 centuries. It had taken months of negotiation, countless meetings, and more political maneuvering than Anahara had thought possible. But she'd done it. 18 of the 23 northern packs had officially recognized her claim. The remaining 5 were holdouts, not hostile but cautious, waiting to see if she could actually deliver on her promises of stability and fair governance. It was enough. More than enough for a beginning. Anahara stood at the center of the amphitheater, wearing robes that had been carefully preserved by the loyalists for 70 years, the phoenix mark visible on her back through the deliberate cut in the fabric. Around her, hundreds of wolves from every allied pack bore witness. Alpha Korra performed the ceremony, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd with perfect clarity as she spoke the ancient words of coronation. And when she placed the simple crown, no jewels, no ostentation, just worked silver etched with pack symbols, on Anahara's head, the amphitheater erupted in howls of celebration. I present to you, Korra announced, Anahara Aroha Kaimana, Queen of the Northern Territories, Keeper of Pack Bonds, first of the restored line. More howls, more celebration. But Anahara's eyes found only one wolf in the crowd. Rengi, standing at the front in ceremonial armor, pride and love written across his face. Her mate, her partner, her anchor. That's a lie, Anahara said, but doubt crept into her voice. Is it? Tane gestured to her. The phoenix mark. Do you know why it burns gold instead of the traditional black? Why your gifts are stronger than any royal in recorded history? Your grandfather's bargain changed the bloodline itself. Made it more powerful, yes, but also more volatile. And that volatility threatens every pack in these territories. He took a step forward, and Rengi immediately moved to intercept, but Tane held up peaceful hands. I'm not here to harm you, princess. I'm here to offer you a choice. The hunters will stop pursuing you, permanently, if you agree to certain conditions. Binding magic that limits your power, prevents it from being passed to future generations. You can have your throne, your unity, your peace. Just agree to be the last of the royal line. You want me to end my own bloodline, Anahara said, disbelief and fury warring in her voice. I want to prevent a catastrophe that killed hundreds the last time it manifested, Tane countered. Your great-grandmother went mad with power in her final years. Started wars over perceived slights. Used her gifts to compel loyalty rather than earn it. That's what the enhanced royal blood does, princess. It corrupts absolutely, eventually. Anahara wanted to reject everything he was saying, wanted to call him a liar and walk away. But something in his voice, in his eyes, suggested he believed every word. Even if what you're saying is true, she said slowly, even if my grandfather made a mistake, that doesn't justify killing my entire family. Children, innocents, you've spilled so much blood. To prevent rivers of it, Tane said. But I'm offering you another path now. End the bloodline peacefully. Rule wisely and well for your natural lifetime. Then let the territories return to balanced pack governance. No more concentration of power in a single line. No more risk of another mad royal. And if I refuse? Tane's expression hardened. Then we continue hunting. Not just you but anyone you might have children with. Any heir you might produce. Because this ends with your generation, one way or another. The threat hung in the air, clear and uncompromising. Rengi stepped forward, his voice deadly. You threaten the princess and her future in the same breath you ask for parley. That violates. I speak truth, Tane interrupted. Uncomfortable truth, but truth nonetheless. The princess can verify everything I've said. Ask the eldest of the loyalists, the ones who remember your grandfather before the coup. Ask them about the forbidden magic, the deal he made. They know. They've always known. He turned to leave, then paused. You have time to decide, princess. But not infinite time. Every day you delay, more wolves hear about the royal heir returned. More wolves swear loyalty to you. And when you inevitably succumb to the corruption in your blood, all those wolves will suffer for it. I'm not corrupted, Anahara said, but her voice wavered. Not yet, Tane agreed. But power corrupts, princess. Enhanced power corrupts absolutely. It's only a matter of time. After he left, Anahara stood frozen in the clearing, Rengi's presence beside her the only thing anchoring her to reality. It's not